Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again. Today we will discuss another vintage Mexican Mafia group photograph and learn a little bit about the men along the way. This photo is not only rare due to its age, but we also have access to the rear of the picture. We will begin by analyzing the dedication, but before we begin, a quick word from our sponsor. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. The dedication is written at the top of the rear of the photo and it reads, Órale, hermano Tommy, aquí te va el foto que te prometí, con mucho orgullo y respeto. Tu hermano Güero es. Translated, that reads, All right, brother Tommy, here's the picture that I promise you with pride and respect from your brother Güero es. Güero es is, of course, Raymond Widoshai Shryack from Artesia. And as you can see, Widoshai not only walked the walk, but being fluent in Spanish, he also talked the talk. He provides a list of the men pictured and goes on to tell Tommy, and I'm assuming that's Tommy Chagoya, that there are 12 brothers on the main line, 5 weren't pictured, and all those pictured are made men or carnales. The photo was taken on April the 22nd, 1973 in San Quentin. Now let's turn our attention to the front of the picture and begin with Wedo Shai standing far left. Wedo Shai participated in the murder of 2 of the men captured in this photograph. The first murder was that of Edward Salino Lopez, aka Güero Green Eyes from Florencia. Here is Shy and Green Eyes together on the lower yard. Was Güero Shy playing him out of the box and rocking him to sleep? Who knows? On May the 30th, 1973, Green Eyes was found face down, fully clothed with a towel covering his head, in the shower area at the west end of the San Quentin gym shortly before noon. He apparently died from a massive skull fracture, but was also stabbed and strangled in what was described as a gangland slaying. This was the first death in 1973 at San Quentin. Green Eyes was admitted to San Quentin from San Diego on May the 8th, 1972, to serve 2 consecutive 5-to-life terms for first-degree robbery with use of a firearm. The adjudication of this crime would lead to his death. The details of this murder are documented in Ramon Mundo Mendoza's autobiography, Mexican Mafia, The Gang of Gangs. After Mundo's return to San Quentin in 1973, he was approached on the B-section yard by Louis Henry from San Diego and was asked if a guy by the name of Eddie Lopez, aka Green Eyes, got into the clica. Mundo lied and told him he wasn't sure and asked Louis why he needed to know. Louis told him that he and Green Eyes were crime partners in some armed robberies in Chula Vista, but once they were arrested, Green Eyes turned state's evidence against him in return for a lighter sentence. Mundo told him not to say anything and to provide him with the court transcripts, which were due to arrive any day. Upon receipt of the transcript, Louis' story was confirmed and Green Eyes' fate was sealed. Güero Shai, David Davy Perez from San Francisco, and Vincent Chente Gutierrez from East Los were given the assignment to take out Green Eyes. They lured him into the showers on the west end of the San Quentin gymnasium with the offer of shooting some carga. Güero Shai walked up behind Green Eyes and slipped a rope over his neck, preventing him from crying out. Next, Davy Perez had hidden a length of pipe in his waistband, bludgeoned Green Eyes over the head, and Shenton finished the job by stabbing him 4 times in the back. The other murder Güero Shai participated in is that of Bruno Chavez from the Avenues. Here is Bruno just after paroling, enjoying a little freedom with his carnal and fellow homeboy from the Avenues, Danny Dangerous Dan Diavila and Raymond Chavo Perez from Bakers. On February the 11th, 1977, Bruno Chavez was stabbed 12 times by Güero Shai and Alfie Sosa in Glassell Park, terminating his membership. Bruno, 29 at this time, was getting tired of all the killings and wanted to stop serving the Mexican Mafia and just kick back and live his life. Of course, this was against the MS Code of Conduct that dictated the only way out of the Mariposa was death. Furthermore, to make matters worse for Bruno, he didn't like Robot's heavy-handed management style, and the two had a falling out. Robot took it as disrespect and began plotting on Bruno. Eddie Sailor Boy Gonzalez testified before the Los Angeles grand jury detailing several murders. Unfortunately for Huero Shai, Saylor testified that the murder of Bruno Chavez was voted on by him and 11 other members at the baptism of the daughter of fellow Mexican Mafia member Steve Calote Amador in San Francisco on January the 30th, 1977. Saylor testified that Bruno was killed for not wanting to participate in intimate business and that Huero Shai and Alfie Sosa were the two brothers that conducted the murder on February the 11th, 1977. Huero Shai was convicted and sent back to the CDC. The next individual to the right of Huero Shai is Paul Memo Garcia from Pacoima by way of Mexicali. On May the 30th, 1971, Memo was at the La Cita Bar on 13168 Van Nuys Boulevard in Pacoima when he became involved in a brawl with Jose Marquez inside the nightclub. The bouncers began breaking up the fight and handcuffed Marquez and placed him outside and then returned inside to break up another fight. Memo ran outside and quickly stabbed the handcuffed Marquez with a 3-inch knife in the chest and then ran back inside the club. Sitting about 100 yards away were two Foothill Division Vice Squad officers sitting in a parked car. They said they were unable to stop the attack because it happened in a matter of seconds. Memo left the bar with two female companions, but was captured a short time later in San Fernando. He was convicted of first-degree murder on November the 3rd, 1971. On April the 25th, 1973, Memo made a move against fellow mobster Big Pete Martinez from the Avenues. Here's Big Pete pictured with his carnal and homeboy, Bruno Chavez. Memo and Big Pete were embroiled in a dispute over a punk. Memo moved on Big Pete in the laundry shower area, stabbing him with a 10.5-inch bone crusher twice in the chest and once in the stomach. Pete survived the attack, but his membership was terminated. Memo was eventually transferred to Folsom, where he continued to participate on the hit detail. On November the 16th, 1976, Memo, Big Mike Mulhern from Primera Flats, and Larry Huesos Gallegos from La Mirada murdered fellow mafioso Robert Bobby D. Diaz from Compton. They attacked him on a staircase between a cell block and the dining hall, stabbing him numerous times in the chest and stomach. Bobby D was found by staff laying in a pool of blood with a bloody shank nearby. He was transferred to the prison hospital where he was pronounced dead. In 1984, Memo was still being housed at Folsom, but the mafia had evolved and was now using camaradas to carry out hits. In the past, hits were only entrusted to members because the mafia feared that a murder beef was a heavy load to carry for a non-member, which would necessitate their murder to ensure silence. On March the 19th, 1984, James Jimmy Coppola, a longtime Mexican mafia associate with ties to the Gambino family, was executed by camarada Jimmy Speedy Cuevas from Keystone. The hit was ordered by Memo because Coppola owed money to Little Mo Farrell for a drug transaction. It was later revealed that the amount of money owed by Coppola was negligible, and the opinion was that the debt did not warrant his murder. Furthermore, the Carnales felt that it was not a wise business decision since many of the brothers engaged in business endeavors on the streets with Jimmy and saw the potential for future lucrative business ventures given Coppola's connection to La Cosa Nostra. A few years after this murder, Memo paroled and contacted his brothers from the streets, letting them know he wanted nothing further to do with the Mexican Mafia. Standing to the right of Memo is Edward Salino Lopez, aka Güero Green Eyes. We've already discussed his murder, so we'll move on to Alfonso Chato Lujan from Verdugo. Unfortunately, that is the extent of the information I have on Chato, so we will move on to the men squatting in the front row. Squatting far left is Philip Black Segura from Clover. He entered the CDC in 1968 after being convicted of second-degree murder and assault with the intent to commit murder. He was paroled due to the Negley bill that instituted the determinate sentencing law, and like many of his other brothers, he ended up in the feds as a result of a bank robbery. Real quick, I'd like to thank Bobby Castillo from Fresno, who shared with us some of his pictures from the time he spent in the feds. Bobby, a former Mexican Mafia member, is pictured here with Willie Bobo at Lompoc. This is the back of another historical photo that Bobby shared with us. It was dedicated to him by Robert Black Bobby Ramirez from Cantarranas, also known as Romantic or Romantico. Now let's turn our attention to the front of the photo. Pictured from left to right are Willie Bobo, Black Bobby Ramirez, Champ Reynoso, Baby Steve, and Black Segura. Four of these men carried out the first Mexican Mafia murder in the BOP, and the other one turned state's evidence. Black Segura, Willie Bobo, Black Bobby, and Champ Reynoso were convicted of murdering fellow Mexican Mafia member Tomas Hapo Trejo from Clover on November the 11th, 1978 in Lompoc. Apparently, the fellows were not happy that Hapo failed to move on a Nuestra Familia member at Terminal Island and revoked his membership. Hapo was found in a cell, lying in a bunk in a pool of blood at 3:35 p.m. He was stabbed 45 times in the chest and was pronounced dead at the scene. Stephen Kennard, aka Baby Steve, was not a Mexican Mafia member, but was also indicted on charges of murder and conspiracy to commit murder. However, he flipped and became the star witness for the prosecution. Another interesting aspect of this photo is that it contains three original federal Mexican Mafia commissioners, Black, Willie Bobo, and Champ. Black was released from the BOP on September the 9th, 2020. Willie Bobo was released on December the 4th, 2018, and Champ Reynoso died on November the 21st, 2018. Before we move on, I wanted to share this picture of Black Segura and Güero Shy, reunited in the feds, a little older and a little grayer, but still very dangerous men. The last individual we will discuss, squatting in the middle, is Daniel Spider Arriaga from Eloyo Mara. Spider was made a brother by Richard Ruiz at DBI in 1970. Here is another picture of Spider alongside Robert Robot Salas from Hazard Grande in Folsom Prison during the filming of the movie The Jericho Mile. Several mafiosos can be seen in this movie, including Mafia associate Jimmy Coppola, whose murder was ordered by Memo Garcia in 1984, which was discussed earlier in this episode. On August 17, 1990, prosecutors said that Spider and fellow mafioso Joe Colorado Arias from Colton traveled to a Fontana home as requested by Robot Salas to enforce a drug debt. Several men were gathered in the front yard when an argument ensued. Witnesses said that they observed Arias exit the passenger side of a vehicle that was parked in the driveway of the home, looked across the street and asked the neighbor what he was looking at, and then proceeded to raise his hand and begin shooting. After the dust settled, two men were dead and two others were seriously wounded. Spider was one of the men killed, suffering 21 bullet wounds. Another witness testified that they saw Colorado stand over the two men that were killed and shoot them in the head. They also said that Colorado stood over Spider, cursed at him, kicked him twice, and shot him in the head 2 or 3 times. Colorado was arrested 2 months later on October the 12th, 1990, at the Los Angeles jail as he was visiting Joe Morgan to explain what happened. On June 12th, 1991, Colorado was convicted of murdering Spider, but the jury couldn't reach a verdict on the second murder charge. He was sentenced to 28 years to life with the possibility of parole. To be clear, Spider was in good standing with the fellas when he was murdered. Some of the brothers believed Robot was behind his execution, but regardless, they knew for sure that it was Colorado who pulled the trigger. Upon his arrival at Chino, Colorado was still being housed with other active Mexican Mafia members. During an exercise period, a fight broke out, and the officers put the yard down and removed the combatants. Knowing that staging a fight was a common method of distracting officers to make a move, the officers began checking the rest of the inmates for injuries as they exited the yard. That is when it was discovered that someone had made a move on Colorado. As you can see, he has a minor injury to his neck. Later, it was revealed that it was Ernest Chuco Castro from B&E that tried taking Colorado out. After this, Colorado was placed in protective custody and would die a few years later due to natural causes. That ends the episode after having learned a little bit about each one of these men, none of which I believe seems enticing. That world is filled with murder and mayhem. Your greatest threat doesn't come from outside of your gang, but from within. Think about that before getting involved in that life. Because, like I've said many times before, there's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for these men, only a cement box or a box 6 feet under. Good night and God bless.